Hello and welcome to Sabha TV. You're watching News Tonight with the host Rajat Kane. Before we go to the headlines, here is a small appeal by Rajya Sabha TV to all our viewers to stay safe from COVID-19 pandemic, wear face masks, wash hands and face regularly and maintain physical distancing while stepping out. Remember, these simple precautions are all that it takes to defeat the pandemic. Well, now over to the headlines. Far-reaching reforms ensure transparency and autonomy in institutions of higher learning over last 6 years, asserts Prime Minister Modi, assures that efforts are on at all levels to make India a global hub for higher education. India is at advanced stage of developing COVID-19 vaccine, asserts Prime Minister Modi at Grand Challenges annual meeting. Says process underway to put together sound vaccine delivery system. India announces Australia's participation in joint naval Malabar exercises along with Japan and US. Move to curtail China's influence in Indo-Pacific region. Government is in process of making fresh assessment of economic situation, says Finance Minister Ramanandan. Doesn't rule out option of further stimulus package. And political bigwigs hit campaign trail in Bihar. Chief Minister Nitish Kumar addresses rallies in Aurangabad and Jahanabad. RJD leader Tejasvi Yadav holds public meeting in Nevada. Well, news in details. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asserted that future of world will be shaped by societies that invest in science and innovation. Delivering the virtual keynote address at inaugural function of Grand Challenges annual meeting 2020 on Monday, he called for well-planned investment in science and innovation.
The future will be shaped by societies that invest in science and innovation. But this cannot be done in a short-sighted manner. One has to invest in science and innovation well in advance. That is, when we can reap benefit at the right time. Similarly, the journey to these innovations must be shaped by collaboration and public participation.
While addressing the gathering, Prime Minister said India is at the forefront of vaccine development and is planning a well-developed vaccine delivery system.
India is now at the forefront of vaccine development for COVID. Some of them are in advanced stages. We are not stopping here. India is already working on putting a well-established vaccine delivery system in place. This digitized network, along with digital health ID, will be used to ensure immunization of our citizens.
Modi also said India is witnessing a decline in daily COVID-19 cases and its growth rate, while the country also has one of the highest recovery rates of 88% in the world.
India has one of the highest recovery rate of 88%. This happened because India was one of the first countries to adopt a flexible lockdown when the total cases were just a few hundred. India was one of the first to encourage the usage of masks. India actively began to work on effective contact tracing. India was one of the earliest to deploy the rapid antigen tests.
Well, speaking about the pandemic, Microsoft founder Bill Gates spoke of how different scientists across the world are working to develop the vaccine. The event will continue to 21st via video conferencing. Well, now let's take a look at the latest COVID-19 situation. Single-day cases in India dropped below 60,000 for a second time in this month. COVID-19 positivity rate stayed below 8% for fourth day in a row, indicating that the spread of infection is being effectively contained. India on Monday reported 55,722 new coronavirus infections in the last 24 hours. It was the lowest figure since early August. India recorded its lowest death toll since July, with 579 deaths reported in the same period. Total infection in the country have now crossed 75.50 lakh. This includes over 66.63 lakhs recovery and 1,14,610 deaths. There are 7,72,000 active COVID-19 cases at present, comprising 10.23% of the total case load. The recovery rate has improved from 88.26%, while the case fatality rate stands at 1.52%. 9.50 crore samples have been tested so far, with 59 lakh samples tested on Sunday. Well, ahead of the festival season, Health Minister Harshvardhan has cautioned against becoming complacent in observing precautions against COVID-19. Pointing out a recent increase in coronavirus infections in Kerala, Harshvardhan said on Sunday that state is paying price for negligence during Onam festivities. He urged people to avoid large gatherings and opt for celebrations at home to ward off the risk of COVID-19 infections. The minister also clarified that community transmission of coronavirus infection is restricted to certain districts and is not happening across the country.
Kerala, which was reporting an average of 2,000 daily cases in the first week of September 2020, reached 4,000 average daily new cases fortnightly. You can say that Kerala paid the price for its gross negligence. After having good control on the virus during the initial phase of the pandemic, the situation now has worsened. I would say that other states should learn a lesson from Kerala's spurt in COVID cases due to negligence during the Onam season. I would also say that all states need to be careful during the coming festival season and ensure that COVID appropriate behavior is followed diligently.
Well, the Health Minister also said that India can limit active COVID-19 cases to 40,000 by February 2021 if coronavirus appropriate behavior is followed. The prediction is based on study that suggests India has witnessed a peak of coronavirus and the declining trend may lead to minimal cases by February next year.
अगर अगले 3-4 महीनों में देश के लोगों ने जो सावधानी बरतने का काम है वो ठीक प्रकार से किया, यानी कोविड एप्रोप्रिएट बिहेवियर में कोई किसी तरह की कमी ना रही, तो चाहे सर्दी आएगी तो भी और चाहे फेस्टिवल्स आएंगे तो भी हमारे भारत में जो डिक्लाइनिंग ट्रेंड शुरू हो गया है वो आने वाली फरवरी तक काफ़ी सिग्निफिकेंटली डिक्लाइन होगा। और शायद अगर जहाँ तक मैंने उस रिपोर्ट के बारे में देखा पढ़ा है, वो उन्होंने कहा कि उस समय फरवरी में शायद देश भर में 40,000 के करीब एक्टिव केसेस रह जाएंगे।
Well, he added that vaccination procedures, training of staff and other logistic needs to be coordinated by both state and central governments at appropriate time. Earlier, Harshvardhan also said that although there are no intranasal COVID-19 vaccines under trial in India at the moment, Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech are expected to pursue clinical trials of such vaccines in the coming months on receipt of regulatory approval. Well, according to a government-appointed committee of scientists, novel coronavirus infections in country have peaked. The 10-member panel that conducted study on progression of COVID-19 pandemic in India also claims that pandemic can be controlled by early next year if all precautions against virus are followed.
A study commissioned by the Department of Science and Technology predicts minimal cases by February if potential spikes in the festival season are avoided. The key finding suggests the disease peaked in the middle of September when active cases touched 10.17 lakh. The committee says active cases, even if they rise in the festival months or due to cold weather, are unlikely to surpass last month's figure. However, it has suggested that existing personal safety protocols have to be continued in full measure to avoid a sharp rise in infection.
Yes, but with subject to one very, very important caveat, which is that the current protocols of social distancing, mask wearing, things of this nature are not relaxed. If they are not relaxed, then as you can see on your screen there, the yellow curve would have shown that by around the end of February. I mean, let's not argue about 24th February or 28th February. Somewhere around the end of February, the number of cases would have become very, very negligible. Negligible does not mean zero. I think that's very important to remember. But a few scattered cases here and there, up and down the country, we would be quite able to manage those. On the other hand, if we start relaxing and celebrating too early and stop following the safety protocols, we will actually see a rise in cases as you saw on the screen just a few minutes ago.
The committee headed by Professor M. Vidyasagar of IIT Hyderabad used a new model to map the spread of pandemic in India. The 10-member panel said the early and comprehensive lockdown had pushed the peak of cases far into the future and also reduced the load on the system. It noted that with no lockdown, the pandemic would have hit India very hard with peak load of over 1.4 crore cases in June itself.
By implementing the lockdown when we did, we actually pushed the peak very far out. So if your audience can see the red curve, that is what would have happened if there had been no lockdown. And what this curve shows is that we would have had a peak of 140 lakhs, 14 million active cases, right around the end of May, early June, and it would have completely overwhelmed our healthcare system. Whereas in reality, what we got was the yellow curve, which is the very, very flat curve, and that is the one that has peaked in the middle of September, and the peak value is less than 10 lakhs, 14 times less than what would have happened without the lockdown. So we pushed the peak into the future by several months, and we also reduce the size of the peak by a factor of 14. This is what people call flattening the curve.
The committee says fresh lockdowns should not be imposed on district or state level now unless there is an imminent danger of healthcare facilities being swamped. The Department of Science and Technology had constituted the committee in June to evolve a national supermodel for the progression of COVID-19. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Nearly 7 months later, schools for class 9 to 12 reopened in Uttar Pradesh and Punjab on Monday. State governments have issued COVID-19 guidelines and measures that schools must follow. Functioning of schools have been suggested in 2 shifts. Duration of class has been reduced. Social distancing, sanitizing, wearing masks and temperature checks is mandatory. Parents' consent is mandatory for students to attend the school. However, online classes will continue as before. Infrastructure enhancement and structural reforms introduced in the last 6 years has brought transparency and autonomy to institutions of higher learning in the country. Prime Minister Modi said on Monday while addressing an event in University of Mysore through video conferencing.
Addressing the centenary convocation of the University of Mysore on Monday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said efforts are being made at all levels to make India a global hub for higher education. He said the new education policy is aimed at bringing fundamental changes in the system.
एजुकेशन सेक्टर में ये जितने भी रिफॉर्म्स हुए हैं उनको नई नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी नई दिशा नई मजबूती देने वाली है। नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी प्री नर्सरी से लेकर पीएचडी तक देश के पूरे एजुकेशन सेटअप में फंडामेंटल चेंजेस लाने वाला एक बहुत बड़ा अभियान है। हमारे देश के सामर्थ्यवान युवाओं को और ज्यादा कॉम्पिटिटिव बनाने के लिए मल्टी डायमेंशनल अप्रोच पर फोकस किया जा रहा है। कोशिश ये है कि हमारे युवा तेजी से बदलते नेचर ऑफ जॉब्स के लिए फ्लेक्सिबल हो, एडॉप्टेबल हो, स्किलिंग, रीस्किलिंग और अपस्किलिंग आज की सबसे बड़ी जरूरत है। नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में इसका भी बहुत ध्यान दिया गया है।
Recalling the words of erstwhile ruler of Mysore, Nalwadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar on the girls in higher education, the Prime Minister said, girls today exceed boys in all levels of education, including innovation and technology.
आज शिक्षा के हर स्तर पर देश में बेटियों का ग्रॉस एनरोलमेंट रेशियो बेटों से ज्यादा है। हायर एजुकेशन में भी इनोवेशन और टेक्नोलॉजी से जुड़ी पढ़ाई में भी बेटियों की भागीदारी बढ़ी है। 4 साल पहले देश की आईआईटी में बेटियों का एनरोलमेंट जहां सिर्फ 8% था, वो इस वर्ष बढ़कर 2 गुने से भी ज्यादा यानी 20% तक पहुंच चुका है।
The Prime Minister also listed out the multiple reforms that have been undertaken in the last 6 years to empower the people in diverse fields from education to agriculture and labor. Bureau Report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, Australia is all set to join India, Japan and the US in the crucial Malabar naval exercises. Australia's participation comes against the backdrop of ongoing standoff with China in eastern Ladakh. After much deliberation, the exercise is likely to be held by the end of November. The meeting to finalize the modalities of exercise will be held virtually by the end of October. Australia's inclusion in Malabar had come up for discussion at the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting in Tokyo earlier this year. Australia had initially requested for an observer status in the trilateral exercise in 2017. At the time, India was reluctant to accept its request in view of China's sensitivities on the matter. But in the wake of China's unilateral and unjustified actions that have increased tensions on the LAC, India said it was open to Australia's inclusion in Malabar. Australia's Defence Minister Linda Reynolds said the Malabar exercise reflects the trust between 4 countries and symbolizes the joint efforts of 4 countries for a free and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Australian Foreign Minister Maris Penn described it as helpful in establishing peace and stability in the region. Australia's entry into exercise also indicates a significant improvement in bilateral cooperation between 2 countries over the years. The Malabar naval exercises started as bilateral exercise between India and US in 1992. It was expanded into trilateral format with inclusion of Japan in the year 2015. Well, the 8th edition of annual Indian Navy-Sri Lanka Navy bilateral maritime exercise SLINEX 220 began in Trincomalee, Sri Lanka on Monday. The three-day exercise will continue to 21st of October. The Indian Navy is being represented by indigenously built ASW corvettes Kamorta and Kilton, led by Rear Admiral Sanjay Vatsyayan. The Sri Lankan Navy is being represented by SLN ships Saira and Gujabahu, led by Rear Admiral Bandara Jayatlika. SLANX 20 aims to enhance interoperability, improve mutual understanding and exchange best practice and procedures for multifaceted maritime operations between both navies. A Chinese soldier was caught by Indian forces in Ladakh after he strayed across the line of actual control, the army said on Monday. The soldier, identified as Corporal Wang Yao-long, was caught on Chumar Damchok area. The Chinese soldier has been provided with required medical assistance, including oxygen, food and warm clothes. A request has also been received from the PLA about whereabouts of the missing soldier. The army said PLA soldier will be returned after completion of all formalities. Well, the day after Twitter landed in the middle of controversy for showing Jammu and Kashmir as part of China, the microblogging platform on Monday called a technical issue and corrected the geotag location. In its clarification, Twitter stressed it respects the sensitivities around the issue and has launched an internal investigation into the matter. On Sunday, national security analyst Nitin Gokhale had first pointed out that Twitter showed Leh's Popular War Memorial Hall of Fame as part of Jammu and Kashmir, which was further shown as part of People's Republic of China. Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Monday said the government has not closed an option to come up with another economic stimulus package. She said this at virtual interaction at the launch of book by N.K. Singh, chairperson of 15th Finance Commission.
Well, I've not closed the option for another stimulus if it comes out to be, because every time we have announced one, it's been after a lot of consideration of inputs which have come from various different sections of society. Then we sit and work it out within the ministry, with the PMO, and then take a final call. So, yes, I have not closed the option to come up with one more stimulus.
On the issue of contraction of the GDP, the finance minister said that government is doing assessment based on input that are very different from what the situation was in July. Recently, the government
we have only now started doing some kind of an assessment because we waited for the commencement of the second half, which is just started. And we've got a lot of inputs which are very different from what we had in July. And ideally, it should be so. So perhaps, yes, sometime we will have to come up with a statement. Whether I do it in public or whether I do it in the parliament is one thing. But obviously, the finance ministry will have to make an assessment of what it's going to be like.
Recently, the government announced steps to stimulate consumer demand, including advance payment of a part of the wages of central government employees during festival season and more capital spending in an attempt to bolster the pandemic-hit economy. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman also interacted with secretaries of ministries in petroleum and natural gas and coal, along with representatives of 14 central public sector enterprises to review capital expenditure in the current financial year. Sitharaman said that capex by CPSEs is a critical driver of economic growth and need to be scaled up for current and next financial year. She asked the secretaries concerned to closely monitor the performance of CPSEs to ensure capital expenditure to the tune of 75% of capital outlay by the end of third quarter of the current financial year. This was the fourth meeting that the finance minister have had with various stakeholders to accelerate the economic growth amid COVID-19 pandemic. Monday was the last date for withdrawal of candidature for the second phase of Bihar Assembly polls. Nomination of 1,514 candidates were found valid in the scrutiny. For this phase, polls will take place in 94 constituencies spread over 17 districts on November 3rd. Bihar will vote for 243 assembly in three phases, October 28th, November 3rd and November 7th, and the counting of the votes will be held on November 10th. With polling dates coming to a close, political parties have stepped up campaigning in Bihar. JDU President and Chief Minister Nitish Kumar on Monday addressed public meetings in Gaya, Aurangabad and Jahanabad districts. Addressing a gathering at Sher Ghati, Kumar said it was his government's initiative that women got 33% reservation in Panchayati Raj institutions. Well, Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad also addressed public meetings in the state and appealed to public to bring back NDA government by a huge majority. BJP senior leader Bhupendra Yadav campaigned for NDA candidates, addressing election meetings in Raxaul, Bagha and Darbhanga district. The chief ministerial candidate of Grand Alliance and RJD leader Tejasvi Yadav held a series of public meetings in Gaya and Nevada. Meanwhile, senior Congress leader and MP Akhilesh Prasad Singh said in Waris Aliganj that Grand Alliance is committed to bring back Bihar's lost glory. CPIML Secretary Dipankar Bhattacharya also addressed public meetings in Koshi and Madanganj, and RLSP and Jan Adhikar party leaders Upendra Kushwaha and Pappu Yadav also addressed election rallies. Well, Monday was the last date of withdrawal of candidature for by-elections to 54 assembly seats in 10 states. Polling on all 54 seats will be held on 3rd of November and the counting of votes will be done on the 10th. While elections will be held for 28 seats in Madhya Pradesh, 8 will go to polls in Gujarat, 7 in UP, 2 each in Jharkhand, Karnataka and Nagaland, and 1 seat each in Chhattisgarh, Haryana and Telangana. A special two-day session of Punjab Assembly on farm laws passed by the centre started in Chandigarh on Monday. Assembly began with paying homage to all the farmers who lost their lives in the ongoing agitation against the union laws. The House was adjourned for an hour after arbitrary references. After resumption, it adopted resolution to extend duration of special session by a day. The bill to negate the farm laws is expected to be tabled on October 20th. Well, Vice President Venkaiah Naidu remembered Matangini Hazra, the indomitable freedom fighter, on a birth anniversary on Monday. Matangini Hazra was born on October 19, 1817, small village in West Bengal's Bidnapur district. In a Facebook post titled Matangini Hazra, the indomitable freedom fighter who bravely faced bullets, Naidu said, "Let's honor the memory by recalling her heroic efforts during India's freedom struggle." The Vice President said, "Whenever I read about such extraordinary people and their stories of valor, my heart swells with pride and gratitude." He added it was due to their persistent and valorous efforts that our country got freedom from unjust British rule. Well, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi, Ramanandan, former Wing Commander of Indian Air Force, died on Sunday at her daughter's home. She was 96. She was first women commissioned officer of Indian Air Force. She was commissioned as an officer in Indian Air Force on August 2, 1955. Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Ramanandan became the Wing Commander on the 22nd August 1972 and retired on 28 February 1979. Well, that's it in this bulletin, but before we leave, we'll remind our viewers of our appeal. Stay safe from COVID-19 pandemic, wear face masks, wash hands and face regularly and maintain physical distancing while stepping outside. Remember, these simple precautions are all that it takes to defeat the pandemic. Good night. Watching Rajya.